what was your break? How did you get into titles? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it something you just fell into?
It's weird. It's weird because it is something that I always wanted to do, and all the people that I have worked with, and designers that have come, that I've hired that have started doing this, I always say to them, well, I was the one that wanted to do this first, because in high school, I thought that I was a graphic designer. I wanted to be a graphic designer. In undergraduate college, I was working as a graphic designer, but I always wanted to be a filmmaker. Or not necessarily a director, but I wanted to work at the Creature Shop at ILM, and I wanted to be involved in filmmaking. And where I grew up, everybody said, get it, you can't do that. You got to get a real job, be an architect or something, or be an engineer.
Yeah. No, we've heard all that.
And even the guidance counselor in high school was saying, can't make a living drawing monsters. Meanwhile, at that very same time, they're making E.T. in Hollywood and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so, but I thought that was a good marriage of these two interests, typography and graphic design and filmmaking. And I saw Altered States and The Dead Zone and Alien. And I went, as soon as I went to graduate school, I thought that I needed to get more of a design education, because in undergraduate school I didn't really study design. I studied interior architecture, but that's another story. But I went to Yale Graduate School. I was lucky enough to get in there to study graphic design and book design. But the whole time I was thinking about doing main titles when I got out. So when I got out, I went to R. Greenberg in New York, who had done Altered States in The Dead Zone. And they at first didn't hire me, and then they called me back. I had taken another job, actually with Steve Frankfurt, who gave them a lot of the Alien work and a lot of the marketing work, and he did posters for like Rosemary's Baby. So those are the two places I wanted to work. I wanted to work for Stephen Frankfurt, who did the titles for To Kill a Mockingbird. Or I wanted to work for Richard and Robert Greenberg. And I worked for Steve Frankfurt for about 6 weeks. Then Greenberg called and said, you can work full-time freelance. We're not sure if you, I remember Bob Greenberg said to me, I'm not sure if you have an aptitude in motion. I'm not sure if you can think in terms of motion, but you can do the print work. So come in and do the print work.
And you went, I'll show you.
And then I said, well, I'll do that if you can just get me in on one of the pitches when you have a main title. If you let me pitch main titles, I'm happy to do the print. And I did a lot of the print and logos for things, but the first one I did was Life Lessons for Martin Scorsese, part of the New York Stories trilogy. And then I just kept doing them ever since. But of course, I was in the background, kind of laboring for Bob Greenberg. But then he sent me to Los Angeles to start the LA office of our GALA, and that's where I did 7. And that's when I got more opportunities, because I started, once we sort of...
So 7 was, would you say, was the one that you
people asked for me, people asked, sure, but I had... The other thing that happens is if you work for a larger company, you're anonymous in a way. And but when I broke away from the New York office and I was kind of in LA by myself with another executive producer, I started to say, I want to have credit. I want to get my name. So for Braveheart and Dead Presidents and American President, and I had done about 40 title sequences before 7, but I started getting credit, and that was weird.
And did you find that often when you have these sort of icons that are out there and have done everything you've seen since high school, that you treat them as heroes, but when you meet them and see them, they're just like every other guy. They're just like regular people. But for 10, 15 years before that, you had them in this sort of...
Well, the Greenberg thing was the holy grail to me. And but it took me 8 years before I got that kind of disillusionment, or I was so willing to do anything, I was very eager. So it took, and Bob was pretty good Bob Greenberg was pretty good about once you got really good at something, you know, if I was starting to shoot live action, then he turned me in the direction of, you know, actors or
Yep.
something,
Okay.
or you're good at 2D animation. You understand the downshooter and the optical printer.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing pretty well. We didn't have, well, we got computers at that time, but there were, a lot of the work was still done in a downshooter animation stand and with optical printers, and I started to get familiar with that.
So
And
seven would have been done.
7 was the traditional optical entirely.
Really?
Sure. Yeah, it was all. I mean, it was edited on the Avid,
Yep.
so I would
Okay.
say it's digital in that sense. But all the type, you know, was scratched and scanned in, and but the type was all shot on film,
Yeah.
and I shot all the live action, all the hands and everything on film. Then it was edited, and but it was finished as a traditional film optical. So myself and the editor, Angus Wall, went to Pacific Title, and we were like taking pieces of film out of the trash and
God.
writing things on. I mean, if you look
Yeah.
at it, it's
Yeah.
there's all the, I was writing like the 23rd Psalm, and you know all this writing on it. But that was the thing that's, you know, somebody called me from SIGGRAPH, which is the 3D conference they have.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
a big 3D
Yeah,
thing, and
yeah.
and they have the electronic theater, and he said, we want to show the 7 titles in the SIGGRAPH electronic theater because we think it's an excellent example of computer graphics.
And you went, where's
There's
the computer?
No computer graphics. So that was analog.
And
you know,
and do you how much? I suppose it varies from director to director, but do you have?
they all have a say in
They
the
all
way
have
that
a say.
the way they want it to be. Some give me, you know, more freedom than others, but they're the client, you know, and you can have a difficult client, or you can have a very, you know, sort of hands-off kind of
Yeah.
client that just, you know, will let you get it to as close as you can get it, and they might make a comment at the end, or sometimes they're sitting right there in the edit
Yeah.
bay with me. But I've never not met the director. I've never didn't.
And do you find that that people come to you because of obviously what you've done in the past? Are they expecting you to repeat a lot of stuff that you've already done, and you have to say, well, actually, why don't we do it like this? Or are they open-minded and not saying, you know, give me that particular feel that you've done before?
I'm trying to think of a
'Cause when I was-
succinct. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, when I worked at Duffy Design,
Yeah.
way back 20 years ago, people came to Duffy because Duffy had a look.
Right.
And if you tried to give them anything else, they weren't interested. It was almost like illustration that they wanted. No, we come because of this look, and this is what
Yeah.
we want. And it wasn't like design necessarily was over here, where people would come to you because you didn't have a look, but you had an idea. So I don't know. Do people come and expect?
Well, that not anymore,
No.
and not so much for main titles ever, really. I mean, I would say that for main titles, I try not to have a look. I mean, if there's any kind of style, I think the style is just that we're trying to solve a problem. I'm just trying to solve, you know, doing what's right for that particular movie.
Yeah.
So I would hope that my style is just figuring out what's appropriate for a particular
Yep.
film rather than applying a style to every
Yep.
film that I come across.
Yep.
But agencies, you know, early on, advertising agencies would see
Yeah.
7,
Okay.
and so they would come and say, can you do something in that kind of pastiche for the
Yeah, that would be
the
right.
cereal
Yeah.
commercial, you know?
And
And
you-
I'd say, and he'd say, you want me to do something dark for this? I mean, I will. I'll make something dark for the cereal commercial. And then they're all horrified. They're horrified that I
Yeah.
actually did
Yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you just want it to be kind of handmade, but not that dark.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, but filmmakers, the only kind of thing that they came to me for was like, it's so silly, but sometimes, and I don't think it's the filmmakers, I think it's the studio, I think it's maybe the post-production supervisors say, oh, that guy's kind of good at comedy, and that guy's kind of good at more dramatic things,
Yeah.
so Kyle's kind of good at the darker ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they came to me for some of the darker ones, but I would try not to use the same, you know, repurpose the same
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. Yeah.